Hello, this is Pick, and welcome back to my developer commentary for Integration by Parts DX presented by FTB. Today's a big day for resource production, and it's all going to start by making another coke oven. Not only will this increase creosote production, but it'll also be used to get charcoal going to automate fuel for steel production as well. I only just realized Man of Steel all-in-one tools could mine obsidian, meaning I could vein mine it the entire time. Better late than never. You could be doing this right out the gate of the second chapter for easier duskstone. With duskstone derived materials, I can upgrade the Starlight crafting altar to a celestial altar. How does this relate to charcoal and coke ovens? Just wait a bit and you'll find out. Since it has a new structure anyway, I figure now is a good time to pick a new location for the Astral stuff. I don't know what I want the structure to look like yet, but this is the spot on the island with a dense star field. I should mention that a phosic resonator is required to see dense star fields, not the resonating wand, which was a mistake I made in the previous episode. I can make and place down a starlight infuser here, as it'll be important for resonating gems, and it also makes lenses without the aquamarine cost. It'll need to be filled with liquid starlight, so make sure you have at least 12 buckets of it, preferably more as it'll consume some of it on crafting for a random chance. By right-clicking on the infuser with an aquamarine and then the resonating wand, it will infuse the gem. Since I need to wait for another night, I might as well get some light building done. Once it's dark enough, I can make the tree beacon. This'll farm wood, as well as anything else trees drop, like sticks, saplings, or apples. To set up a tree beacon, all you need to do is place it down and plant some saplings near it. The saplings will be this holographic green color instead of looking like a normal tree, and the drops will appear around the beacon itself. Note that the trees are still trees in the world and will not grow if they overlap with each other. If the beacon is broken, they revert to normal trees. The green circle you see around the beacon is its range. A very useful trick is filtering an ender hopper with a locked drawer. This prevents pickup of unwanted items. I replaced the chest on the peat setup with a locked drawer as well. The coke oven goes on top and pipes deal with the ins and outs as needed. I decided to run all the pipes under the platform in the end. With everything set up, I can now batch run steel. Charcoal production isn't fast, but that's why you allow it to stock up. There's also plenty of creosote for bituminous peat. I'll probably optimize things at a later point, but this will do for now. Macerate 16 coal to get 16 coal dust, then turn that into carbon plates. Macerate a heavy metal like iron, an alloy like bronze, and a light metal like tin, and combine their dusts to get advanced alloy blend, which will smelt into advanced alloy. These go into an advanced machine block, which then itself goes into a quarry. The quarry is going to remove a lot of the need for manual mining, though sometimes you just want to go on a quick trip for 1 or 2 ores anyway. If you're familiar with the quarry from Buildcraft, this functions in a very similar manner. Place 2 landmarks to form the corners of the quarry's mining zone, then the quarry itself on one of the unfilled corners, and make sure to account for the few extra blocks on one of the quarry's sides that will be left over, unless you use 3 landmarks to extend the rectangle. This defines the area the quarry will go over. It isn't the fastest thing ever, but it can be sped up with overclocker upgrades. At the start I planned on using it for just a couple of coke ovens to keep it powered, as it would process the coal into coal coke, but that ended up being insufficient. That would work with a small number of overclockers, but I ended up making more generators and needed more fuel to power it. The only chunk that needs to be loaded is the one the quarry itself is in. It will automatically load the other chunks. It also prevents fluids from flowing by replacing adjacent blocks with a pseudo block that the quarry ignores. Unlike the Buildcraft quarry, this one has an internal inventory and can be started and paused manually. It will auto-pause if the internal buffer fills, which means you'll need to resume it manually. To bring the items all the way back from the quarry site, I can use a warp plate. The warp plate teleports all entities that step on it from one plate to another. This includes drop items and works transdimensionally, and that means that I can place a hopper down and the items that go on the receiving warp plate will enter the sorting system. All you need to do is swap the attuned shards in each plate and they'll link with each other. To drop the items, I simply put a warp plate on the end underneath an open crate. Since I changed the design several times, I'll just say how the end result looked. Several logistical transporters extract from the quarry on the blue channel, which send to the coke ovens, and a buffer chest also on the blue channel. The coke ovens are before the buffer, so the coal will always go to the coke ovens first. The buffer then uses a few logistical transporters to send to the open crate. It's important to have the buffer, as due to how send requests work with the transporters, they'll think that they're filling the open crate's inventory and won't send more than one bunch at a time, which is especially problematic with their low transfer rate. Lastly, the coke ovens send on the green channel to the generators, which receive only coke on the green channel. On the receiving ends back at the base, the hopper can keep up with the input of items, but it can't keep up with the transfer, so an extra transporter extracts from the hopper to make sure all the stone and deep slate are taken out, so the system doesn't overfill and cause items to despawn. This system is by no means perfect, but since this is for entertainment, I try to use interesting methods rather than the things you might expect everyone else to use. This is what the system looks like in action, isn't it great? Oh, by the way, might want to click on the muffler in your inventory screen to mute the teleport sound, or it'll get very obnoxious very fast. And what is an over-engineered mining operation without an over-engineered ore processing setup? I could easily send pipes over to the macerator, but it would be more fun to use luminizers. To set up luminizers, all you need to do is place down a luminizer launcher that came from a quest reward, a luminizer on top of it, and then more luminizers along the path you want the items to take. Then right-click with the Wand of the Forest in binding mode between each luminizer and it will connect them in a one-way fashion. To use them for item transport, a little more is required. To simplify my setup as much as possible so you can understand what I did, I put an input hopper on the macerator. A comparator reads it and stops the sender if the hopper is full, using wireless redstone to send the signal over. A timer ticks every second to make sure the launcher sends the items on it over to the hopper, and a logistical sorter tied to an open crate sends the 6 compatible ores to the macerator to be processed. I have to take the output ingots and manually put them in the drawers, but other than that it's mostly automatic. A quick status update on the quarry shows it's doing fairly well. I won't show it too often since it'll take quite a while to mine, especially since I started so high up, but a brief pause here and there to look at it is okay. Rubber is probably easiest to obtain from slime balls if you aren't making rubber wood with the tree beacon, and thankfully there's a slime island in view of my base. Do note that you can't get slime pearls from these slimes, as they're specifically Tinker's Construct slimes. Now is also a good time to craft the remaining industrial contraptions machines I haven't made yet. The centrifuge has its own recipes, and the roller can be sped up to outpace the metal press. I also want another carpenter for manual crafting, since the other one is busy making bituminous peat. Remember when I said I added more generators to the quarry? More overclockers means a much higher power demand. This amount gets you by on about 5 overclockers, though they're manually fueled for the most part, since there's only so much coke to go around. Thankfully, the surplus of peat from the peat setup makes that easy. And for my next trick, milk. For food, sure, but also for something better. Cows eat grass usually, now the grass can eat cows. Sort of. This simple setup can handle all of your bone needs. Can never finish a build before starting another, can I? Well, it's not like I won't use the space. This time I'm making a kitchen. It'll connect to the ground level via an elevator, and I'd like to decorate it as a small restaurant in a ring shape. To increase the number of wood options, I can perform alchemy to create sapling types I don't have. The alchemy catalyst handles the vanilla saplings, but this process will let me make all of the tremendous saplings I don't have. By creating some mutated earth and placing down some ingredient saplings, I can right-click on the center block to form the result. It's not an overly fancy floor design, but it will do the job. There's enough room for some small-scale cooking automation. Time to make some juice. Friendly reminder that if an anvil only falls one block, it won't sustain any damage, meaning you can make it fall a single block over and over infinitely for this type of crafting procedure. I don't get around to setting it up right now, but I will another time. To make any of the more complicated dishes I want, I'll need a cooking plate. It's not too expensive at this stage, but using it is a little awkward. To heat up any liquids, it needs to be smelted in a furnace. There are ways around this later, and I get to one very soon. For now, it'll have to be done manually though. To demonstrate how the cooking plate works, first right-click with the matching item, then throw the ingredients on top. This cools the plate down and forms the fluid for crafting on top, which the ingredients will fluid craft into the proper item. I chose these plain trapdoors because they kinda look like one of those frying baskets you'd see in a fast food restaurant. At least that's the image in my head from SpongeBob. I've never actually seen one before. To make the food I would like to produce, I'll need some automated wheat. Since bone meal is in no short supply, I can use that to my advantage. To power a macerator up here, I just made a wind generator, as it makes use of the elevation. It then grinds the bones for 5 bone meal per bone. Thanks to the changes Botania makes to dispensers, they can now plant seeds, meaning this is an opportunity for automated crop harvesting, and bone meal is unrivaled in speed at this stage. It also works for most crops that aren't either 2 blocks tall or from mystical agriculture, though it has the downside of not being very expansive unless you want to make a row of dispensers. Speaking of Botania, I make a runic altar real quick. Just to have it really, I'll make more use of it in another episode. I'd like to make a Drum of the Wild, but apparently the recipe is broken, so I'll just throw out the materials and spawn one in. I'll try to fix it by 1.5, I can't get every mistake. The gist of this system is that the seeds plant first, then 3 bone meal fire, then finally a pulse mana spreader fires the messenger shot at the drum, and it harvests the fully grown wheat. A messenger lens makes the spreader fire a very small amount of mana compared to a normal shot, ideal for activating a Drum of the Wild. The ender hopper then collects the wheat and seeds, which filter to their destinations. Now to track down a warm ocean to get some coral. I recommend a snowflake pendant, as you can zip across the water surface, probably better than Frostwalker enchantment can. Coral can only be harvested with Silk Touch, so if you want some, you'd best be packing a silky tool. And while I'm exploring, to update my food situation, I made a number of sweet berry jelly toast. This is to get my fruit meter up. The grain is more of a byproduct. With some legally distinct monster balls, I can capture cows and bring them back for breeding. This was one of the reasons I wanted to farm wheat. A feeding trough will automatically breed the cows as long as their numbers aren't too high, and some child filters will let the babies fall through while the adults stay up for breeding. The first way I designed this works for cooked steak, but later I realized I want raw beef instead. In the first design, vector plates bring the cows to a lava blade that they can only touch when they grow up, as they'll be tall enough then. This later gets refined with anchor plates that will let the babies stay stuck in one spot so they don't touch the lava prematurely. The beef will then get sent up to the kitchen so I can set up an automated cooking for it. Of course, if you want to live off of a diet of nothing but sushi, you can do that as well. Either way, have a good diet or don't. You can kind of see what I'm going for here. The vector plates move the dropped cow to the anchor, with a stone barrier preventing the cow from jumping into the lava from the second vector plate. A hopper at the end collects the beef, leather, and inferium, and some logistical transporters move it over to the drawers. A redstone upgrade on the drawer for the wheat will turn the system off if it happens to fill up all of its possible destinations. Can't be lagging everything out with wheat on the floor, can we? This second design is much smarter. Instead of dumb trapping shenanigans, the filter acts more as an airlock this time. If you shift right click on a filter, it gets inverted, which means only fully grown cows will fall into the damage traps below the second filter. I do think it could be more efficient with the range of the feeding trough, but for personal food it isn't that big of a deal. You get beef faster than you use it. And the next thing to make is a melting chamber. I'd like some pipe upgrades which require crystallized oil. This will let the pipes from pipes be responsive to redstone, as well as doubling their transfer rate. This contraption is designed to batch craft dough. Since each pipe extracts using a multiple of 4, it works with the recipes. If the kitchen becomes too small, I guess I'll need to move everything. Using the ingredients I've collected, I can make some spaghetti and meatballs. This is essentially an upgrade to the sushi as it hits the same food groups. Tomato sauce is a bit more annoying than it looks, but that's nothing some automation can't fix. To solve the issue with the cooking plate, I'll next need an ignition lens. The manual crafts for these are fairly straightforward. However, I also need a collector crystal, which is going to require an attunement altar. The attunement altar is quite large, so be sure to have a lot of space for it. Before I can attune anything though, I need to make a telescope and find some constellations. To do this mini-game, look at the constellation shape in the Astral tome, then look at the big stars in the telescope on a given panel and see if they connect to form a constellation. If they do, draw the lines and you'll discover it. You'll then need a bunch of spectral relays, so once the altar is structured correctly, you'll hold the constellation paper or the constellation you want in your offhand, and place spectral relays on all the blocks which have a blue glow above them. They should show the constellation connecting the dots. Throw a rock crystal on the altar to attune it to that constellation, then craft it into a collector crystal. The collector will create starlight at all hours, but how much depends on the time of day and if the constellation it's attuned to is out or not, in this case Vorcio. For my purposes, a weak rock crystal does the job fine. Now, by placing the collector down with view of the sky and linking it to a crystal lens with the ignition lens placed inside it, the cooking plate will always remain hot as long as the ignition lens is pointing at it. No more manual smelting and taking forever. While this isn't a final design, you can get an idea for how anvil automation works here. You might want different machines doing it though. The last thing I'd like to do today is get an infusion altar set up. This way we can move on to the next chapter in the next episode. I've already made all the base ingredients for this thing before, so to set the altar up, place down the pedestals like so. I believe you also have to place the altar itself last, so be sure to break and replace it. It also has a quirk to where you need to put recipes in based on where north is. The top of the recipe faces north, which is a kind of dumb mechanic, but whatever. Since the quarry happened to mine blue corundum, I'll do a trial run with infusing a diamondium crystal first. Be sure to place the item in the center last or it won't work though. You have two options, either use more of the main ingredients for not needing an extra one to craft one crystal at a time, or you could craft one block with an extra ingredient required. Generally blocks are better. Later I can upgrade to the crafting core, which doesn't require any of this annoying right clicking or directional nonsense. This can act as an alternative for getting enchanted books though if you're interested in that. The last thing I'll do this episode is use the infused diamondium I have to upgrade my barrels. This should fix the storage issues I've been having in the background. And with that, episode 5 draws to a close. Maybe one day I'll be able to upload more than one episode in a week. This has been Pick. I'm glad to have seen you and I hope to see you again.